folks, we are back with another year-end edition, I guess, of sorts, of Unfinished Business. Unfinished Business Television. I am your host, Jeff Galashaw, and with me, as always, is Andre Joseph of AJ Epics Productions.
Die Hard is a Christmas movie.
Yes, it is. This week, we have a big old show with lots of topics, lots of trailers, and our usual amount of reviews. The only thing is, if you came here looking for top 10 lists, not this episode. So you'll have to wait until next year to hear our, I guess, best of the movie year and a little bit of worst of the movie year. So without further ado, let's get into these stories, shall we? Unfortunately, in a shock to everyone, Kirstie Alley died this week at age 71, which came out of nowhere. Most of us of a certain age remember her from playing Rebecca Howell on Cheers after Shelley Long left the show. And she has had a very long acting career, movies, television, I would say specials, but I don't think she ever had her own primetime special. Infamous Scientologist, but we're not going to talk about that part of her lifestyle. We're going to celebrate her and her work. And I remember at a young age being captivated by her because I don't know what it was. I know this is going to sound corny to all of you, but even at a young age, she seemed like one of those dangerous girls, like the ones you would hear about who smoked in the bathroom, And I remember her playing in a TV movie where I believe she played Gloria Steinem when she went undercover at the Playboy Mansion to write an article. But I think of my first vision of her is in Star Trek 2 as Vulcan. And, over the years, of course, I love Sibling Rivalry, her movie with a young Bill Pullman and Ed O'Neill, and Madhouse, of course, that we've talked about many times here with John Larroquette and her. Later in her career, she had Veronica's Closet, the sitcom, and the short-lived Fat Actress, where she was looking to poke fun at herself and her weight gain over the years. She was once married to actor Parker Stevenson. She was in a John Carpenter movie, Village of the Damned. No offense, I'm guessing Meg Foster passed on the role. They had kind of a similar look, And of course, a fave of everybody here on Unfinished Business, Summer School, with Mark Harmon, who we recently talked about his film, Worth Winning. But yeah, just a big loss. She was still a great actress, and I guess she was full of personality as long as you stayed away from certain subjects, So those are my memories of Kirstie Alley. Andre, what do you remember of Kirstie Alley and her career?
I don't want to get into the bad stuff because I don't think it's the right appropriate venue for that. But I will say, for me, yes, Cheers, Star Trek 2, Summer School, the Look Who's Talking movies, I think probably stood out the most for me as a kid, especially the second one, because we played that a lot at my grandma's house. And she was incredibly talented and funny. And it's funny how, she was sort of at first looked at as kind of a sci-fi vixen after Star Trek. They tried to put her in very serious parts. So when she came on Cheers, everybody thought, oh, the show's over. You can't have Sam without Diane. The show's not going to work that way. But bring her in as Rebecca and her comic timing, her chemistry with Ted Danson and the rest of the cast, it prolonged the show's life and also made it more popular than the Shelley Long period, which is kind of crazy to say, but it's true. It really did take it to that legendary status. So from that point forward, she became a comedic actress and one who did it really well in everything that she did afterwards. We're talking movies, It Takes Two, which I did not see. I know it's an Olsen twin flick. She did a lot of TV movies and so forth, and the reality show, as you mentioned. So I want to remember her in that light before things kind of went south. And I don't think it's fair to really get into that without saying, hey, she meant something to all of us growing up in the 80s and 90s.
True. And I guess Village of the Damned was her going sort of a little back to her sci-fi
Yeah.
roots. I'm shocked, like later in her career, she didn't go, maybe more sci-fi, back to those roots. Because I think she would have been welcome.
Well, I
I
know
mean,
she kind of shunned the whole Star Trek persona right away, and also because they were paying her less money if she had done Star Trek 3.
um,
But she definitely had like kind of a love-hate thing with the Trekkies versus Robin Curtis, who loved playing Savick.
well, I'm like, look at the wonders Chucky has done for Jennifer Tilly's career. So that's why I said she maybe could have came back, but definitely rest in peace to Kirstie Alley. And also, speaking of late '80s movies in which you would be surprised, she's in Loverboy with Patrick Dempsey and Carrie Fisher. She played a vital role in that. So let's get on to the rest of our news stories. Well, this is not much of a news story. It's just an excerpt from an interview, a little bit of trivia that Hugh Jackman was apparently offered Casino Royale after X-Men. The only reason he turned it down is that he didn't want to juggle two franchises at the same time, as he wanted to be able to focus on characterization of whichever character or whichever franchise he was in. As a more of a James Bond fan than I am, do you think it would have been a good fit?
I'm not surprised by that news. I remember when I was in college, Die Another Day came out, and there was already something on one of these radio stations that Pierce was out and that they were looking at Hugh Jackman to replace him, which didn't happen. I think that, he probably, if he hadn't played Wolverine, I think he could have been a really good James Bond. But you also have to keep in mind they were completely changing direction at that point. They wanted something more serious, more like Bourne Identity. And I think if Jackman at that particular period in time had come in, it probably would have been more in the Pierce Brosnan direction. That's just my view on it. Not that I don't think he could have handled the Daniel Craig act, but he would have had to change his acting style almost altogether. And look, I think at the end of the day, when I really think back about Bond, and I think Eric Cohen, our friend, can attest to this from the Cinephiles, you really need somebody that's relatively unknown that doesn't have the stigma of another part. I know they did it with Brosnan, he had Remington Steele behind him, but by the time he did Bond, that was long gone. So you need somebody that's totally like not a household name that people can believe in the part. It can't just be the flavor of the month. I'm sorry, Idris Elba. I think you'll be fantastic, but they're likely going to go with somebody we don't know.
Well, I guess if they would have gone with, like, let's say somebody like Clive Owen, the only difference I would see is that I guess when we're in Casino Royale, we're getting more of a younger upstart Bond, and Clive Owen, at least in my mind, seems a little older than that. So it would have been a little like really just starting out, type of thing if he would have taken the role. But that's my 2 cents on there. And the news of why Easy Rider to be remade by the people who own the rights, and they want to modernize it, but I guess build upon the message of the original, and just going by what they say. And
so are they going to make it woke? Because this is one of those movies you should not touch. That was a period of time that started an entire era of cinema, and a time when you had the change in culture and having a story that really wasn't much of a story other than two guys just looking at what's going on in America while doing drugs and hooking up with ladies and, seeing the good and the bad. That's not going to play. That's like doing Woodstock 99 or the other Woodstock that went haywire. Why would you want to touch that? That just seems to me like a bunch of cultured folks in this day and age who think, oh, yeah, let's bring this back, but maybe we'll make it more diverse and cool and, for the millennial crowd. No, this is not going to work. You shouldn't touch this shit. There's some films that have to fit a capsule of time that you just don't ever go back to. Easy Rider is one of them. And Mr. Dennis Hopper is rolling in his grave as we speak.
Well, my thing is, I am not a fan of the movie Easy Rider, but my thing is, I understand what it stood for, so I can respect it in that manner. But, as a watcher, I'm not a fan of the movie. So.
You can't have like Kurt Sutter from Sons of Anarchy write and direct this thing. You can't have like two buff guys playing Hopper and Peter Fonda's parts. That's not the movie.
It's probably going to go through unless it gets bad word of mouth eventually, and they just figure out.
Somebody try to make an Easy Rider sequel where they didn't die at the end.
No, but there was in one of the books, the 50 greatest movies ever made. They did write a psychedelic Easy Rider 2, which took place in the afterlife. And,
oh, Lord.
Yes. So, and it was Dennis Hopper approved, though. So,
but he needed money.
Well, hey, either way, it would have been more interesting than just basically a reboot of Easy Rider. But then again, maybe it'll be like it could but you'd need a master filmmaker, because it could be like how like I said, I respect the original West Side Story, but I much prefer Steven Spielberg's version of the same story. And
Nicholas Winding Refn can do it.
It'll be a lot of neon if he does. Next we have. I know there are some of you out there who are really looking forward to this, but Avatar 2, which has to make more or just as much as the first Avatar film just to be successful.
Okay. So from what I understand, there have been already some early screenings and everybody's saying it's mind-blowing, it's superior to the original, and the visual effects are outstanding, the story is so emotional. So it sounds like it's going to make some money. It's going to probably do well. It could even make $1 billion, because if it doesn't make it here, it's definitely going to make it overseas in China and other foreign territories. That being said, I know there are people that say, don't discount James Cameron. He's the master and all this, and, the visionary that's made all this groundbreaking technology. I've seen enough of these previews and trailers where I'm just saying, I don't see the hype. This looks to me the same as the last one. And the fact that they're already in the process of putting together the fourth movie, which I heard has this amazing script, and they're talking about a fifth and a sixth and a seventh where they're going to go to Earth with these creatures. It's like, can we just go one movie at a time before
exactly
talking about franchises here? Because what might be cool right now, because of the fact that, this is an event 15 years since the last one, people are going to get bored very easily and very quickly, unless you have these creatures coming out of the screen and you could touch them, smell them, feel them. I don't see it. I don't see why kids think this is so amazing. It's Dances with Wolves with aliens, and it's the same damn story. I don't see why this is happening, and I don't think it's going to be making its money back. I think it's going to lose money, and more heads are going to roll at Disney, because even if it does well, it gets massive reviews, how the hell are you going to make that $1 billion or in profit back? It's going to get insane.
Well, I mean, I know he has already told Disney that he has plans for 6 and 7, but only if Disney would want to go forward. And he already said if they do, he's not going to direct them. But I just like that he, again, for 3, 4, and 5, he's like, but I'm definitely down for those next 3. I'm just wondering, is this literally James Cameron just doesn't want to get into video games, but he wants to build a world and a story, with some actions?
not doing a Netflix 4-hour movie like Scorsese did with The Irishman.
Yeah, but I'd rather a 4-hour movie because at least he got it out of his system. Not going to spend the next 20 years making a sequel to the same movie over and over and over again. And I mean, it's like his own version of Boyhood, where we have to watch blue alien characters grow up through their whole age and lifestyle. That's the way it seems like. And again, maybe that is what we're doing. You know, he's up there in years. Maybe he's like, well, I didn't have kids, so I'm just gonna keep writing, different stages of life of this project. Okay, for our next story, pardon the paper shoveling. In the unnecessary sequel, Margot Robbie's Pirates of the Caribbean movie has not been shut down or squandered. Jerry Bruckheimer says it's still going to be made, but first he has to make another one with Johnny Depp. Why?
This is just so confusing. It's either you're keeping Depp or you're not keeping Depp. And Margot Robbie, come on, you got talent. Stop doing the tent poles. Do your own shit. You're better than this.
And also take a break. You don't have to say yes to every script or franchise that comes your way. Because, I mean, I'm trying to think, next to her, who is another person? I mean, Jenna Ortega is pretty busy this year, too.
But she's doing good work.
Yes, but it's like that. It's again where it becomes you keep seeing the same actors and you get tired of seeing it. It's the Kevin Hart curse, where it's like, can I get time to miss you before I see you in another film? You know,
yeah, Reynolds had that problem. Adam Sandler had that problem.
Oh, Reynolds, he's part of something we're going to talk about later. I'll talk about that more when we get to that. But it's just like, stop, Bruckheimer. Stop making sequels. You go back to original properties. You can do it. You and Michael Bay can think of a shitty movie with great action together again, maybe in the sci-fi realm. I don't know. Or, unfortunately, you don't have Tony Scott with us anymore. You could be inventive, like something like Enemy of the State, which is like
they did a prequel to The Rock with a younger Sean Connery.
What is it? Why would you even suggest that? Stop it. He'd buy that idea. That's the worst part. So
Jerry, call me.
They'll be like, oh, and guess who we're going to get? Gerard Butler.
Nicholas Hoult.
But I'd rather Gerard Butler. No offense to Nicholas Hoult. It's like, keep doing quality projects, Nicholas Hoult. Gerard Butler is kind of too late. He still can always, be like, oh, yay, I'll give it to Gerard Butler. He sometimes surprises you with a really good movie. Like, what is it, that Thieves movie?
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
Like, sometimes he'll surprise you with something that's good. But I'll give him, even if the films are bad, he's good in them. I'll give him at least that credit.
He doesn't phone it in. I got to give him respect for that.
Exactly. No matter if it's Olympus has fallen, broken its leg, is stuck at the bottom of the lake. I mean, when in doubt, we could also Sam Richardson when he's not making, what is that his name? Sam Richardson? The Avatar movie.
Oh, Worthington, who's not a draw at the box office.
I'm like, hey, he's got to do something in between Avatar movies.
I think Gerard Butler's next Olympus's Fall should have him fight Donald Trump or Donald Trump type president.
Yeah, stop giving them ideas for these movies.
Gerard, call me.
Though, speaking of that, I will admit, I kind of miss, like, even though we hated them, like, those end-of-the-year spoof movies that were supposed to spoof one movie, but then would go through all the trends of the year. At first, it started off with the scary movies. Then it moved into Meet the Spartans or Epic Movie.
Well, those guys killed that whole trend.
But see, that's the thing. I kind of miss it only because at least you knew it was coming every December. Like, you knew that type of movie was coming. And I feel like now we don't really know. We know, like, okay, for Halloween, there's going to be horror movies. But it used to be, you knew a Saw movie was coming out that next year.
Okay, so an impromptu news item that I should bring up, and I should have brought up before we started. Liam
Okay.
Neeson starring in a Naked Gun reboot.
Is it going to be him leaning into the spoof, or is it going to be Liam Neeson truly being dramatic in comedic
Well,
circumstance?
that's what I'm gonna say. I think if it does happen, first of all, just acknowledge it's a reboot because Naked Gun, something like that it's cool like that to know what it is. Secondly, I don't think he should play it up. He should just play it like every other Liam Neeson movie and let the comedy just come naturally because that's when he's at his funniest.
Well, to me, the one time I will say I really enjoyed Liam Neeson comedy was when what was that show? I think it was
Life's too
Extras
short.
or Life's Too Short.
Yeah.
When he's trying to learn how to do comedy, and he keeps just doing it dramatically.
Let's do some improvisational comedy now.
It's like I remember something about him being a box boy and something about AIDS.
He was a patient in the doctor's office. And he's like, I have AIDS.
So I'm like, if it's something like that, I am all for it. And also depending on who's behind it. Don't let it be the guys who are actually behind the epic movies.
No, it should be this. Well, I wouldn't say the Zuckers. It should be somebody original.
You think maybe
Seth
Seth
MacFarlane,
MacFarlane?
maybe. I don't know. Yeah,
I was gonna say Seth MacFarlane. Mm.
I think so. He figured it out with. Actually, no, those Western thing didn't work. But he knows how to make it fun.
And okay, next story. John Carpenter calls Nicolas Cage the bravest actor he has ever met. And I'd agree with him because I will give, even for all his weirdness in those roles, he usually gives 100%, and at least he's trying something different with most of his roles. It's never like the same type of Nicolas Cage performance. It's like, amazingly, it's actually the higher his paycheck, the more like normal he got, the lower his paycheck, the more experimental he would actually get. And so maybe it's good that, he kind of didn't pay his taxes for years, because it got him to go back to doing his best work. Or else he might have been in like the villain in Fast and the Furious 11, with a Jamaican accent, like he always wanted to play. Do you have anything to say about that story?
No, I agree with this assessment. I mean, this is a guy who first started as a character actor, then he became a big action star, then he had the tax issues, and then he kind of found his way again. Yes, the roles are kind of weird and offbeat, but he doesn't phone it in. He embraces it. And he actually did some of his best work in the last few years with Pig and Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. So yeah, I agree. He is brave because any other actor in his position making the $15-20 million salary, they're just going to play it safe. And he doesn't. And I have to respect him for that.
Okay. Speaking of actors, Zoe Saldana says that she felt stupid for only doing franchise parts, and she felt like she missed out on making, I guess, or honing her craft more, and maybe trying more original roles and projects. But before either of us gets into her, she does say she was grateful for the franchise roles. So it's not like she's like biting the hand that feeds, like, yeah, I could have been this. Well, how do you feel about this? Her comments, I should say.
Getting into her, no pun intended. I think, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Her hot point was when she did Avatar and Star Trek that year, 2009. Everybody was on the Zoe Saldana hype train. Like she was going to be the star of the decade. You have an agent. You could have started a production company. You could have went out and found some original films to do in between the big franchises that would have shown your range of talent. But you signed on to these Avatar sequels. You signed on to Guardians. you signed on to Star Trek. And if you noticed, the Star Trek role eventually got reduced in Star Trek Beyond. Avatar, it seems like we're not playing her up as much in the previews, if you've noticed. It seems like she may not be in this for the long haul, her and Sam Worthington, if you ask me. And Guardians, I mean, we saw what happened in Infinity War and Endgame, and even with the new Guardian movie, I don't know if she's going to remain in the MCU past this point if certain things play out the way they might. And then when you look at the stuff she did outside those franchises, there's nothing really remarkable. She did Columbiana. Nobody saw that. She did the Nina Simone movie, which grew all this controversy over her skin tone and her performance. And that really, I think, might have been the biggest issue her career had, was when she did that. I think that's when the phone stopped to ring less. And so what has she done outside of Avatar that's really made you go and say, wow, this girl is amazing, and we need to sign her into all these A-list films and give her that Oscar-worthy performance? We have not seen that. And that's not the fault of necessarily her, I don't know, herself, as far as, you know, you signed on to these contracts. Like, come on, you could have found other parts. It's not that hard. You could have fitted it into your schedule. I understand you have a family, you have kids, you got to take care of them. There's got to be other forces going on here. And I just am like, when they say this stuff, and I know she said she's appreciative of those films. They've certainly got her a house and a roof over her head, but come on. This is what you signed up for. You have other opportunities. I don't know. I just think that there is talent there, but she just hasn't found those scripts.
I agree. I mean, I know she was also in Ben Affleck's big directorial film that bombed.
Dead by Night, yes.
Yeah, so I know she was in that. And I even liked her in Vampires versus the Bronx, even though she's only in one scene. But I think maybe that's the thing, is that Hollywood, when they did use her, it was more like girlfriend roles. And independent films were really only the only time where she got meaty like type roles. And my thing is, like, maybe if she would have, I don't know, maybe, I don't want to say keep it real, but like kept up that momentum, like with like maybe Columbiana's, where she's playing the lead, at least in an action movie, rather than, oh, I'm the girlfriend of the guy, or I'm the sex pot, like in, oh, what was it, The Losers? And
oh yeah,
an action film, or Takers, where again, girlfriend role, and spoiler, gets killed,
And there was that movie with Bradley Cooper that didn't really do well.
I didn't even bother watching, unfortunately. But like, if she got roles more like, what was that? Death at a Funeral, for instance. I liked her performance in that. It was something more like that, where she's just more than the girlfriend or the voice of reason. She's even in Amsterdam with 20 other people. But even her presence there, they give her, look, the movies, I'll talk about the movie someday, but she's one of the more memorable aspects, at least for me, of the movie, that just shows, like, if you give her more meat, she can come through, So, but like you said,
down the road of Hilary Swank. That's the comparison I would make.
I would hopefully more go with maybe Gabrielle Union, and
Yeah, but Gabrielle Union didn't have like that height, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, now it's just a bunch of franchises.
Yeah, she never really got the franchise, but I mean, she had her own action movie, and that Thriller, which I still remember well. Not the greatest movie, but I remember her in those jeans. But anyway, it's on to the next story. Well, this isn't there. Obviously, since John Wick 4 is coming out, we have the spin-off Ballerina, starring Ana de Armas, and big shock, Angelica Houston's going to reprise her role as a person who runs the assassin ballerina school. But this is what gives me hope. Len Wiseman is directing. not the greatest director, but a very good director when it comes to action films and sequences. So I do have hope, and he has a dark vision. I mean, with Francis Lawrence, I'd have him even be a little more confident, but with Len Wiseman, I'm like, good. And I mean, this is obviously the start of them expanding the John Wick universe, because soon we're going to have the Continental about the Hotel, the television series with that. And then I don't know what, if Ballerina's a hit, will they have like a side character from that spun off or what? But you know what? I'm down for it. And so, what do you feel about the Ballerina spinoff?
I'm down for it too. I mean, we saw in No Time to Die that Ana de Armas can handle action. It'll be cool to see the other side of the John Wick universe where it's not just him killing a bunch of people, but now seeing, other groups and organizations outside the Continental and playing that out. Maybe we'll get like the Bowery Kings story in a separate film. And, obviously you mentioned the TV show that's coming out. So I'm interested in seeing like the rest of that world and how they expand it. Just don't turn the Fast and the Furious and take him to space, because I know that's been teased.
John Wick in space?
Yeah.
That would be horrible. But then again, it's Hollywood, so you never know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Next. Well, this just happened just today. Apparently, Warner Brothers, or DC more like it, has decided that they probably are not going to move forward with Wonder Woman 3. And also maybe even cancel Man of Steel 2. Because apparently they are going in a new direction in general, which might actually be good, but it just reminds me, after all this brouhaha over Henry Cavill coming back to Superman, now it's like, oh, that show you kind of dropped out of to do this? Yeah, you probably should have stayed on for another season, because we might cancel your project altogether. But there's always Shazam 3. What are you thinking? Because you're more the comic book movie person here.
So what I read, and some of it I think is speculation, according to this Hollywood Reporter article, they canceled Wonder Woman 3 because they didn't like Patty Jenkins' treatment. They're not doing Man of Steel 2. They're not doing another Black Adam, despite an earlier report that said that the sequel to Black Adam was going forward alongside a Hawkman spin-off movie. So there's some little bit of conflict in news there. And apparently the Aquaman sequel might be Jason Momoa's last film, and then they may have him play Lobo instead. So what it seems to be, if you put it all together, based on this news, if it's true, it feels like they're just going to dump out whatever is left. The Flash, Aquaman, Shazam, anything that's already in the can or being finalized as we speak. And they just want to do away with everything. I mean, I guess with all the issues with the Snyderverse, with all the meddling by the studio, different cuts of that, Suicide Squad, the Ezra Miller controversy, the Amber Heard controversy, Ben Affleck just being up and down with playing Batman. And some of these guys are getting older and getting more expensive to hire. I think James Gunn and Peter Safran are in a place where they said, you know what, to hell with all of it, dump it out, start over from scratch. It's going to be a new slate of new characters, maybe somebody old. But weirdly enough, they're not touching Matt Reeves' Batman. They're still going ahead with a sequel to that and keeping it separate, as well as the Joker sequel that's got Lady Gaga in it. So maybe they'll just be dumped out as well, along with the Penguins show and the Blue Beetle movie with the kid from Cobra Kai. And then from there, it's just going to be all new story, all new direction, something that they could compete with Marvel with. We've been down this road and it's never worked. Maybe it'll work this time, but there's no guarantee. It just seems like there's too much trouble to keep the current direction going. So it's just time for a fresh start. That's what I'm reading from here.
Well, for me, it feels like, I don't know. Did you watch Teen Titans, the original cartoon, and now this like kind of more comedic version they have?
Yeah, my cousin's big into Teen Titans. Go.
I feel like we started off the DC movies kind of more like the comedic little, the stupid ones that they show now, which are like 10-minute long episodes. And I'm hoping with James Gunn's direction and Peter, the other guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm hoping with their direction, maybe it'll be more like the actual Teen Titans, that were like 30-minute long stories, better artwork, more serious, but all around more enjoyable also. So I'm hoping that's the direction that it goes in. I'm just so happy for James Gunn, because to think he went from Tromeo and Juliet to now he like pretty much is halfway in charge of putting out DC movies. So again, kids, see, never think whatever you're starting off with is too stupid or the places you can go. And next story, since we're talking about franchises, Tony Gilroy, the showrunner of Andor and who helped with Rogue One. You can argue whether he rewrote it, wrote it, did he save the film, whatever. But he said the major lesson that he learned from Andor was when it comes to anything such as a sequel, and especially with Star Wars, just don't do the same thing over and over, which is in its simplicity the major lesson I think that franchise needs, and a lot of other franchises could use. Like you have to make a sequel, at least do something creatively. Don't try to please everyone with, we have to do this. We have to do this for these fans. We have to do this for these fans. Just try something different. And I think that is also why Rogue One stands out of all the spin-off movies, because it's not really a sequel. Whereas Solo, as they say at the bottom, a Star Wars story. It just feels like just another story you've seen from the Star Wars universe. The same beats and everything. The lost love, the main villain. How does this all tie in together? Whereas Rogue One, it ties in, but it's not beholden to the later films. And really, until the end, does it really all come together with the infamous appearance of Darth Vader, So I will say I agree with him there. And how do you feel about that?
Well, I know Andor's been challenging on a lot of levels because it's definitely not The Mandalorian or anything that's very lighthearted, what you would expect from Star Wars. This is more like watching Star Trek to a certain degree, which is a little bit more sophisticated and serious. But in this case, it's like watching an HBO series that's in the Star Wars universe. And I think for the regular fans, especially for the kids who watch the Clone Wars, that's completely off-putting. And it is at times like watching paint dry. I agree with him to a degree that you got to make it your own thing. You got to make it a little bit more not the same and follow the certain beats and the same formula that you think was tried and true for the sequel trilogy or even for past films that came out back in the day. But Star Wars needs a complete reassessment because the more they overexpose it, the more that I think it dilutes the brand. And I kind of like this idea, and I don't know if it was Gilroy who said it or one of the writers of one of the shows, who feels they should do like Marvel's doing with these special presentations. Just do that, like a 45-minute movie for Disney Plus rather than, a 8 to 12 episode arc that gets kind of padded out to the point where it's boring. I think that's a worthwhile thing to look at.
Well, see, I find it interesting when Tony Gilroy says it, whereas when you have something like The Last Jedi, which I'm not going to say is a great movie, but I will give it credit. It tried to do something different. I like to think of it as the Avatar of the Star Wars films because I think it was more interested in exploring that universe at that time of Star Wars rather than necessarily tying up threads or, holding characters beholden so that they have something ready for part 3. And that's why I at least enjoyed The Last Jedi, because you saw what happened when the fans complained and we got Rise of Skywalker. It came, pretty much fresh out the box, but it's a familiar recipe, and nobody ended up liking it. It pleased no one really.
But
So
see,
I would.
I
Mhm.
got to push back on that a little bit
Okay.
because you have to remember the original trilogy, The Empire Strikes Back, was nothing like the original New Hope,
Yes.
right? It was darker, it was subversive, it twisted things on your head. There were connections you didn't expect to see happen. And at least in that case, there was a plan. Now, that plan did change a little bit. If you see, like, the Gary Kurtz interview, what the trilogy was going to be versus what George Lucas did because of how he reacted to fan reactions and so forth. So it's
Hmm.
not completely different, but there was still a laid out plan of where the story was supposed to go. Whereas Kathleen Kennedy and company had no idea where they wanted to go with after the Force Awakens. They decided, oh, we don't have to decide who Rey's parents are right now. We'll figure that out later. No, you have a fucking plan because it's very easy to fuck up and screw up the fan reaction after winning them back after the craziness with the prequels, and then all of a sudden, oh, Ryan Johnson's going to come in and smash up the Lego set to do his own thing and completely throw everything off. I don't know. That, to me, you have to have a plan with something like this from
Well,
start to
I
finish.
I think there was no plan because I think what J.J. Abrams was trying to do, at least originally, like with the Ryan Johnson, was let different directors come in and I guess continue the story, but in their own version or way. Because I know for the third film, it was supposed to be the guy who eventually made all those Jurassic Park movies, Colin
Paul
Terra.
Trevorrow.
Yeah, he was supposed to make the third one, but he was I guess according to the timeline, he wasn't finishing his draft fast enough. And after the fan reaction to The Last Jedi, that's when they decided, okay, we got to try and get it back as much to the original as we can. Like, make it, give the fans, here's your happy ending. Let's tie everything off. And so, and you can tell just by watching the film that everything is just rushed. Like, they're just, it's sort of like if me and you ran a fast food restaurant, has many problems. And instead of putting in policies to make sure it doesn't happen again, we're just taking care of the problems at this branch for right now. And then we're just like, okay, we did what we needed. Let's leave. And that is how it feels like with the Star Wars thing. Like each restaurant now has to figure out what is it going to do. But it will have Star Wars. It must have this character, that character, or continue from here. And that's the problem. But I agree with what you said, that one of the things you should do initially always have a plan, or else you end up where we're at now with those films. And for our last news story, Jim Carrey. Well, okay, let me give some context. The Daniels were asked at a writer's roundtable what was the craziest pitch anybody had ever asked them to write. And they told the story of how Jim Carrey apparently pitched them this whole behind-the-scenes movie that was supposed to take place on the set of Dumber and Dumber 2, but it was going to be a found footage horror film while filming this movie on the set. And they actually wrote an outline for it, but that's as far as it went before the producers were like, no, yeah, he pitched it, but don't go forward. We're never going to make this movie. We were just like letting him have fun, But no offense, if that had happened before Everything Everywhere All at Once, you truly would have been prepared for Everything Everywhere All at Once, because there would be no rules or any sanity in any of their projects. And I think of it as a lost maybe masterpiece in its own way.
Well, that definitely goes to show you that Jim Carrey saw talent when he sees it. Honestly, it wouldn't be a bad idea if he got the Daniels to do a Mask sequel, because he did once say in an interview that he would be open to doing a sequel to The Mask if a visionary director came in with a different style than what they did in the 90s. And if you remember, like, the Dark Horse comic book was not a comedy. That was like a dark horror genre of a comic book only became a comedy once Jim Carrey became attached to the film. I think if you get the Daniels to do this, not that they have to, I think after everything everywhere all at once, they should do like their own original projects. I don't think they should do Marvel or DC.
No, definitely not.
But I could see them do like an amazing Mask sequel or reboot and really like just do some amazing shit that would be mind-blowing and totally blow the original out the water.
My question, would it be a follow-up to Son of Mask?
No, that's like a fake history that never happened.
Okay, because I was about to say, I think Jamie Kennedy's free. You know,
treat it like the Dumb and Dumber prequel that doesn't exist.
Okay. Hey, I like Dumb and Dumberer.
I only like the Bob Saget part. There's shit on the walls.
I liked. Well, I'm not saying it's a good movie, but I was entertained. But either way, now we move into trailers. First up, well, let's start with a teaser. We have the You People teaser with Eddie Murphy co-starring with co-writer Jonah Hill with a film by Kenya Barris and co-starring Nia Long and Lauren London. We don't see Lauren London in the preview, but just looking it up online, found out she's who plays the daughter. Look, I like Jonah Hill. I love Eddie Murphy. I really love Nia Long. This reminds me of, I don't know if you saw when Eddie Murphy guest hosted Saturday Night Live, and there was a skit where the family was all coming together to celebrate Christmas, and they kept lying to each other about what they're thankful for, and then you see flashes, and one of them was his daughter being engaged to a white guy. That's what this feels like. Like they made a movie version of this. Now, again, I haven't seen anything more than the teaser. And with Jonah Hill co-writing it, I have a little faith. But for, all the accomplishments of Kenya Barris, Blackish, Grownish, let's not forget there is still Black AF and that last Shaft movie with Shaft, son of Shaft, and grandson of Shaft. And not that great. But I'm going to give it a chance, but I'm going to watch it. But if it's great, I will eat my words and be like, yes, another victory for Eddie and Jonah. If it's bad, I'm going to just dig into this movie. What did you feel about this project and the teaser?
So the teaser was hilarious to me. It already shows that these guys have chemistry. In fact, I think at one point, Eddie and Jonah were going to do Beverly Hills Cop 4 together, like an earlier draft of the script before they changed it. And I guess the Jonah Hill part became Joseph Gordon-Levitt's role. But yeah, I think it looks hilarious just from the one scene. I have two concerns. So one is Kenya Barris. You mentioned the films that didn't work. He also wrote the Coming to America sequel, so that should already make you a little bit nervous. Second issue is this feels like the movie Guess Who, which was a remake.
Yes.
This is like the exact same movie, but Bernie Mac replaced with Eddie Murphy and Ashton Kutcher replaced with Jonah Hill. If it's the exact same film, that's going to be a problem.
I agree. It kind of reminds me a little bit of what I guess Ben Affleck and Matt Damon said about Netflix, which was going to be different for the studio they're going to start. They said that Netflix, their films are like an assembly line.
Yeah.
And I can say with this project, if I wasn't interested in it, I could see how it, like this project coming together, because it's basically it's pretty much everybody Netflix has under contract. Hey, we have Eddie Murphy, we have Kenya Barris, we have Jonah Hill. Why not just throw them together and see what they can come up with, And let's use a tired storyline. I'm telling you, if I see a cameo by Kevin Hart or Ryan Reynolds or The Rock, this movie, I'm going to be like, fuck you, Netflix. Either that or thank God Netflix, you brought them all together. But that's how I feel about this one. We'll see. And speaking of people in public, we have the trailer for Emancipation with Will Smith, as a slave looking to escape to the promised land of New Orleans to get out of slavery. I sit here watching the trailer and I'm like, so we turned down Django and Jada, and this is where we find ourselves. And again, another film that seeks to make Will Smith a martyr, but now you have the extra baggage of the slap heard around the world. So you're like, so he went to the worst punishment on screen by being a slave who plans to run away. One of the things I will note of this trailer, I like that Ben Foster gets credit in the thing. Usually it's just like Will Smith and you just got to guess who the other actors are. But it's like Will Smith. And then it's like a bunch of scenes. And then it's Ben Foster. And it's like, whoa, he got credit? I mean, me and you know who Ben Foster is. But he's not exactly, one of those actors you have deep conversations with, the regular movie-going public. I think most would just be like, hey, wasn't he the dick in Hustle? That's what they're going to remember him for. Or wasn't he one of Marky Mark's dead buddies in one of those war movies? So that's how I feel about Emancipation. The only thing that's giving me hope that this is not going to be horrible is Antoine Fuqua directing. And he even says this is probably the best movie he's ever directed. So how do you feel about the Emancipation trailer?
I kind of want to see it, but then I don't want to see it because I'm not really big on slave movies.
Okay.
And I just think, from what I've heard, it's less of a historical picture and more like a thriller, like an action movie.
Well, it is Antoine Fuqua.
Yeah, so that could present some issues. And I know one of the producers is already out there, like they had the premiere, he had the picture of the guy that was the famous photo, and then he took some flack from that. I think there's going to be an audience that's going to say, oh yeah, this is Will's best film since King Richard, he's amazing, and this and that. And I'm in that spot where I'm like, I'm not ready to forgive this guy yet. I still think he's making excuses for the slap and not really addressing the real elephant in the room when it comes to that. And Chris Rock is still silent. Other than his little remarks here and there at the comedy shows, he hasn't really done an interview to really get knee deep into this, and if he even accepts Will's apology. So I think this is going to be one of those movies where it all reads Oscar bait, but it's going to be completely ignored, regardless of the slap. I don't think it's going to register.
Well, the only part of the trailer they could have edited better is where they're taking the picture of the scars on his back, and you see the face and the camera in the back, and then they cut to the back of scars, and it just does not look like Will Smith's back at all. And that's my one complaint about the trailer. Next is, if you've been to a movie theater at all in the last few months, Babylon, the Brad Pitt movie with Margot Robbie, written and directed by David Chazelle, who did First Man, La La Land, Whiplash. It also has Tobey Maguire in it. Those are the really big stars in the movie. The rest is, some up-and-comers, unknowns. It's supposed to take place when Hollywood is changing from silent films to sound films. I liked it better when they did it in Singing in the Rain. But with this film, it seems to be more about hedonism and, how it has to change the morals, or seeking to change, or at least be held, more behind closed doors. And it kind of reminds me of Ryan Murphy's Hollywood series, where apparently it seems like we're going to forget racism, because it seems like there's a lot of Mexican characters and black characters who are just working side by side like normal. Again, I could be wrong. I haven't seen the movie, but it just seems weird. And Tobey Maguire looks to be some decaying or some kind of sickly, drug addicted, either director or producer. I will admit that's the thing that is really That's the only part of the movie that to me looks kind of interesting. Because again, Margot Robbie is playing another unhinged role where her character is doing drugs, wearing short outfits, and apparently in a scene fighting a snake. So I'm just like, yeah, I guess I'll watch this, but it just seems, as much as it's supposed to be about access, the film feels just excessive watching the trailer. So we'll see. It's giving me Amsterdam vibes. That's all I can say. It's giving me those types of vibes. What did you think of Babylon's trailer?
Seems like another attempt at Damien Chazelle trying to get back to classic Hollywood, and you got two big mega stars in the front. Yeah, I'll probably wait for it on streaming.
Okay. Next, we have the trailer for the sequel. Again, no one asked for is Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, where just the title alone, I'm like, can we please pick something better? I mean, it's still probably better than the Crystal Skull. But, I mean, again, Indiana Jones is at it again, de-aged, and without Steven Spielberg this time, as Indy goes on another quest. And he has a female along for the ride. And Sala fits in there somewhere. I'm like, Jonathan Bryce Myers, can we please just get a Sliders movie for this man? I like Indiana Jones. I was happy with the first three films. I wasn't excited for the Crystal Skull. I'm not excited for this movie. I understand it has its fans, and go for it. But I just, again, like Avatar 2, I have very little interest. I'm willing to give it a chance, but I can't say I'm excited about this film. Andre, how do you feel about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny?
Yeah, it's been a source of a lot of controversy for a while with injuries on the set. There was a death on the set. You got James Mangold constantly on Twitter pushing back at trolls about, gender swapping Indy, erasing Indy through a time travel plot, and all these other rumors that are out there. All I see in this trailer is, to me, they're trying to follow the same beats as the Star Wars trailers, hit you with the nostalgia. Oh, remember Sala? Remember the Dune Ball scene? The John Williams music, trying to get you sucked back into the world of Indiana Jones and make you feel like you got to go see it. This is going to be a big event. Oh, look, de-aged Indiana Jones, and it looks so photorealistic. Oh my God, this is going to be amazing. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, you are way overdoing it with the CGI. That stuff with him on the horse riding through the subway, which is totally unrealistic and even worse than in the fridge. But you could tell, like, it's all deep faked with an 80-year-old Harrison Ford on that horse. They're clearly not done with the CG from what I'm looking at. They're trying to downplay Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who clearly is going to be one of the big stars of this film. And I'm going to just say this right now, and I'm just going to be blunt, because there's reasons to say, well, maybe this will be better than Kingdom of Crystal Skull. Give it a shot, give it a chance. It shouldn't be that bad. But I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to see this movie opening day. I'm going to see what the reviews are. I'm going to actually listen to see what the reaction is. And if I do, in fact, hear this movie ending in a certain way that's going to make me disgusted, I'm going to wait for it on Disney Plus. I don't give a damn. Because honestly, you said the three films, the first three were your favorites. It really should have ended on Last Crusade. With that shot of all the four of them riding off into the sunset, that's where it should have ended. Because going into this day and age, this technology, and the other thing you got to think in mind is kids now are not big into Indiana Jones like that. It's not like if you look at adults in the 80s who grew up with those Saturday afternoon serials, that was like their thing. That was for that generation. And this generation isn't into that the same way. So it could either be a surprise and be amazing, or it could be one of the biggest bombs of next summer.
Well, the only part of it I do like is Phoebe Waller-Bridge, because I'm a fan of hers from Fleabag. So it's nice to see her on the big screen and given something to do rather than just be like a script supervisor or a voiceover role.
But is
So
she going to be there to berate Indy throughout the entire movie and crack a bunch of old jokes? Because that's going to get played out very quickly.
well, we don't know because I didn't see it and I didn't write the script. So
Because I
don't
think
know.
they're not trying to play it up in the trailer right now. There may be a bait and switch going on here.
Well, we'll have to see and find out, but I'm interested in that aspect of the movie, and that's about it. And we have one last trailer, which is the best trailer of them all, Cocaine Bear. I have to say, Elizabeth Banks, you truly outdid yourself here. Basically, this is a movie based upon a true story about a bear that ends up ingesting a whole bunch of, dropped off cocaine, and it caused him to go on a rampage throughout the woods, and it's going to be the movie of the year. This is my Snakes on a Plane. I really want to see it. And if so, Elizabeth Banks, you're forgiven for everything if this movie is as awesome as the trailer makes it look. And with a truly unhinged, I think, final performance from Ray Liotta in the movie, I want this movie out now. I don't even care if it came out in January, the dead month. I would go out of my way to go see this movie. This and Megan will be the most effed up movies, I think, of next year that we know of, released by a studio. How do you feel about Cocaine Bear, the trailer? And
I'm only going to say one thing. Elizabeth Banks made one mistake with this movie, and that's not putting Nicolas Cage in it. That's all I'm going to say about that.
But who the hell would he play?
Mr. Alden Ehrenreich's part. Why is he getting a job over Nicolas Cage?
Because he's cheaper.
Well, he's doing everything now. What would he cost?
Nicolas Cage? I think it would. You're telling me you think Alden, however you say his last name, versus a Nicolas Cage paycheck. You don't think Cage gets more no matter what the project?
Cage in this movie would make this from $1 billion worldwide.
Yeah, but then, do we know?
Potentially his second Oscar.
I don't think so. I don't think anyone's winning an Oscar for this movie.
Well, they should. The Bear should be nominated.
It'll win an MTV Movie Award, maybe. But I wouldn't say anything at the Oscars,
Well, these days at the Oscars, it's getting kind of like the Source Awards now, so I wouldn't be surprised.
I don't think it will. I don't think it would ever. It'll have a lot of jokes on the Oscars, but I don't think it will win. If it did get nominated, it would be like Hard Out Here for a Pimp getting nominated for Best Song. There's going to be a lot of jokes, and it might be crazy enough that everybody thinking it's going to lose wins, sort of, which might have explained Trump. But, so who knows? But in these days, either way, I'm there opening day for Cocaine Bear. And so now we move on to our movie review section of the show. And I guess let's get all the prestige stuff out first. So we're going to start off with The Woman King, directed by Gina Prince Bythewood and starring Viola Davis, Thusu Midu, Lashana Lynch, Sheila Atim, John Boyega. This is basically about the African tribe of women who were basically the main warriors of a kingdom. And we see how they welcome in new recruits to be, the next generation of guards, and how those the training and the ever-changing evolution of the kingdom, where basically Viola Davis is the leader, I guess more of defense, and who has some pull and actually tries to influence the king to end their own slave trade of, enslaving warrior people and, coming together and forming their own nation. This film, other than apparently having a story by Maria Bello, of all people, I saw this in theaters. I loved it when I saw it. I felt it got unfairly judged by people who only knew like a little about the historical aspect of this movie and deciding it was one thing without even seeing the film, which is what I always have a problem with. It's like, if you saw the film and you want to complain about it afterwards, that's one thing. But don't tell us what you think or what a friend of yours told you it was about. Watch the film and then you can actually complain. Because that's like reviewing a movie, but saying, oh, my friend told me about it. That's not a real review then. So, but I really enjoyed this film, especially after coming from, what was the Charlize Theron movie? Gina Prince?
The Old Guard.
Yes, especially coming from that movie. This is a huge step up, This is an epic film that it's not as good as the first Black Panther, but it does, as an African American, give you pride watching the film. And especially, I think, Black women will really enjoy this film because it's their Black Panther. It shows you don't just have to be a wife. You don't just have to do this. You are just as fierce and dangerous as any man and any warrior out there. And I just, like I said, I loved this movie. I don't think it's the best I saw all year, but it is up there. And I would highly recommend this movie. Andre, what did you think of The Woman King?
I liked it too. I felt like it was a companion piece to Black Panther, and not knowing much about the real story, which I know drew a lot of controversy because there's supposedly some inaccuracies about it. If you put that aside, I think it's a good piece of entertainment. It is very inspirational. Viola Davis really shows off not just her acting range, but that she can do action really well. And those sword fight scenes that she did took a lot of hard work, and it shows on the screen. And I even like John Boyega's part, even though it's not huge, just he had a presence and a gravitas that he brought to it that certainly wasn't, we're going to make all the women strong and all the men are going to look weak. And certainly the ones who look weak are the ones that you're not supposed to like. And yeah, you don't like them at all. So I think this was a very entertaining, I guess a female Conan, a female 300 type of picture. And it's brutal. It doesn't hold back and says a lot about Gina Price. I can't pronounce her last name. I'm sorry.
Bythewood?
Bythewood. I think she's a highly underrated filmmaker. I think she should be getting more accolades than Ava DuVernay. That's just my personal opinion. I think she's a far better filmmaker. So yeah, I highly recommend it too.
Okay. I can't exactly agree on your last statement because I'm like, again, she has, oh God, why can I not remember the name of this movie? What was the Charlize Theron movie?
Old Guard.
Yeah, she has that on her. Like, she has Love and Basketball, but then she has the Old Guard. And I'm like, And then
she had Beyond the Lights. That was a very good film.
I love.
That was hurt by its marketing.
And also the male lead got into a little bit of controversy later.
But that was after.
And so I'm just saying that didn't exactly help with the box office either. But like I said, I highly recommend this one. And even for the ladies, there's some eye candy in there for you ladies. But what I really liked is that not only is Viola Davis by far, the most imposing presence, but each character had not only their moment, but their own kind of presence throughout the film. You had Lashana Lynch's character, Sheila Atim, who some of you might remember from Halle Berry's boxing movie, playing her trainer and lover. And she was also in some of those Marvel movies. But anyway, but I just really enjoyed this movie all around. And even though it was considered a hit, I think it still it had an audience that deserves to go watch it and give it a chance. Because I think it should have had just as much people behind it as Black Panther did, to a certain extent. So obviously, highly recommend The Woman King. Next, we have another Steven Spielberg joint called The Fablemans, because he couldn't call it the Spielbergs. That is directed and co-written by him with playwright Tony Kushner. Of course, Janusz Kaminski is the cinematographer, and we have the cast of names that we know. Michelle Williams, Paul Dano, Seth Rogen, Judd Hirsch, Jeannie Berlin, Robin Bartlett, and even David Lynch. This is basically semi-autobiographical about Steven Spielberg growing up, his love of movies and filmmaking, and his parents' marriage through more his younger years and his teenage high school years. And, as his parents' marriage kind of slowly, I guess, disintegrates, and, it might be because of another man, among other reasons. And I will have to say, this is my number 3 movie of the year. That I'm just going to start out by saying that. So that tells you everything. This movie just got me emotionally, visually. I loved this movie. It's the most personal, at least I can ask from Steven Spielberg, because I know Close Encounters of the Third Kind is kind of semi-autobiographical, but that movie never got me. It's not one of my favorites. This one got me. So, I don't want to say too much, because, there's not really much to say. It's a coming-of-age story. You've seen one, you've seen a lot of them. So I will just say it's worth seeing in theaters, because it's just how powerful, I guess, cinema, because even his parents' love story or marriage story in parts also shows I guess it shows his love of cinema just as much watching the film. And I just can't say enough good things about this film. It's sort of like Everything Everywhere All at Once, and for me, The Worst Person in the World. These are just movies where it's more of an experience, and there is so much to say you can never say enough about it. It's more about how they make you feel and all the things you might notice when you start thinking about it again. And so I obviously highly recommend The Fablemans. What did you think of The Fablemans, Andre?
So I went into this kind of knowing Spielberg's story through his interviews and, some of his public speaking about how he got started in film, and certainly his parents' relationship and growing up, the insecurity of being Jewish and living in kind of, like the Protestant areas of Arizona and California as a child. So there was a lot there that I knew going in, and there were some things like I didn't know about the first girl he ever fell in love with, who was like a Christian. I think one thing we said was that there were times where it felt like the characters came off as more caricatures, like
yes,
a little bit on the cartoony side. I could forgive that, though, given the approach that Spielberg took to it. One thing I got to appreciate, again, I can relate to so much of how he got into film, watching the Greatest Show on Earth, buying the toy train and recording that with his camera. It was like me as a kid taking my action figures and videotaping them with my old VHS camera. So a lot of parallels that I could see, or just being so into it that sometimes I didn't really think so much about family functions and all that. Still sometimes have that issue today, but not as bad as I did back then. I also like the fact that there are references to his films. There's like an E.T. reference, there's a Raiders, Saving Private Ryan, but they don't hit you on the head over it. It is very subtle in like those little touches of where he was about to go and places that you don't expect him to go. I think that this was clearly his most personal film since probably either Saving Private Ryan or Schindler's List. I don't think other films he's done since have had those moments, but this one you could feel came from a very personal place and so many friends. And I can understand why he had to wait for his parents to pass on to do it, because he had to have that courage. And I'm glad he did this over the next Indiana Jones, just saying. I think it's a charming movie. I loved it. I would definitely see it again. I recommend it, but I recommend it with a caveat. I would see it with your parents in the theater because I think they would appreciate that era that he grew up in. Otherwise, I would wait for it at home if you're just going to see it by yourself and you're just curious. But I think this is something you see with your mom and your dad.
Oh, okay. Well, what I will say is, like you said, it was the caricature. It wasn't a total caricature. It's just like you said. At times, it felt like they were a little close to caricature, more in voice and tone rather than character. I mean, Paul Dano's character is more, again, the typical 1950s father, always chipper, always having a wise word to say with the son. But like when the one moment where he really sells it is when he sees the pictures that the mother sends Steven Spielberg, and then he looks at the picture and notices something in the background, and that kind of shows he still loves his wife, but also it kind of breaks his heart. And I thought that was like one of the biggest moments of the movie. Next to when he has to explain acting to one of his stars of his movie, and how it kind of makes the scene even more like defining in depth. And as he like just walks off and he just keeps walking, even though like they yelled cut a long time ago. But I guess just really thinking in character, how it overtakes him, and I really enjoyed that scene. But like I said, I definitely, my number 3 movie, see it wherever you can, whenever you can, with whoever you can. I mean, it's great to see with your parents, but even if not, you can watch it by yourself on a big screen. Because I think certain shots are more penetrating on the big screen than if you're just watching it at home.
That's true.
So, but talking about a movie that you could watch at home, we're going to move on to Vengeance. It's written and directed by everybody's favorite character from The Office, BJ Novak, who played Ryan. This film, BJ Novak's character gets a phone call out of the blue that a girl he was hooking up with has died recently, and the brother believes it's under foul play. And because she always talked about him, the brother thinks that he's actually like her boyfriend. So they call him into town, and finding out he's a reporter, wants him to investigate and help get revenge. And BJ Novak's character, who barely knows her, sees this as an opportunity for a great podcast. So he basically collaborates with an ex over the phone to create a podcast over this mystery. And of course, as always, he gets too close to the story and finds himself kind of falling for the charms of this town and the characters. And it becomes a mystery and a kind of satire of, I guess, class to a certain extent, and red state versus blue state, and also just this age and culture. I'm going to say I actually like this movie. I didn't hate it as much as I thought. I might not like it, especially when you tell me Ashton Kutcher's in it. But Ashton Kutcher actually comes through in his role. I think a better actor would have made this truly a more memorable role. But I'm not going to say Ashton was bad in it. Actually, I like Boyd Holbrook the most in this movie. His character, I mean, he plays this type of character usually, but I don't know. This one had a little more heart because he comes off as stupid, and you realize he's not as stupid as everybody thinks he is. Dove Cameron's in this movie. I remember her from Disney. I'm just wondering, I mean, she does a good role. She plays the role well, but she's not in it that much. So I'm just wondering, was him casting her trying to get a younger audience and make more money with the bigger names he could put in the cast? Issa Rae's in it. She's okay. And I mean, she doesn't embarrass herself or anything like that, but it was also kind of like, she doesn't really need to be in this movie. Anybody could have played that role, but I guess having him have an African-American ex-girlfriend makes it seem a little more diverse, and John Mayer playing himself in the opening scene. I mean, that was interesting, giving his reputation. Like I said, I liked it. I think the whole thing with this movie is it depends on how much BJ Novak can you take, as an actor and writer. I don't have any personal problems with him. He can be pretentious, but I actually enjoyed this film more than expected. It's not great, but it's not bad either. So I would say it's a satisfying movie, or as Andre would say, you can catch it on streaming and be perfectly fine. Andre, what did you think of Vengeance?
I thought it was better than the Fletch reboot. I just think that as a story, it felt like the long goodbye for this generation. It had that kind of Altman-esque type feel, having somebody like BJ Novak, having a story that you're not sure if this girl is really dead or not. And, the whole back and forth with him and how, I almost said Hal Holbrook. They're actually related, by the way. Boyd Holbrook, that's his grandson, but I think like distant grandson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, I think it was good. I kind of was wishing Brian De Palma would have directed this, because this is the type of movie that would have been up his alley. He likes to do comedy every now and then, and put that with sort of the thriller element. I think he could have done a good job and have BJ Novak look like a badass. But I do agree with you that BJ Novak does come across like a pretentious yuppie.
Yes. He would have played Tom Hanks's role in Bonfire of the Vanities perfectly.
Oh, totally. He would have been way better than Tom Hanks.
But like I said, I really like, this was one of those movies that came out of nowhere. You saw it advertised and it was like, okay. But once you watch it, it's like, this was actually quite better than anyone would have really expected. I'm like, it would have been interesting if he had a role for Mindy Kaling in here somewhere. Like, she could have played the ex, putting the podcast.
Yeah, she could have played the Issa Rae role easily.
Exactly. So a little office reunion. I don't know where you'd put Steve Carell.
It came the Ashton Kutcher part.
He'd be awful old to still be a music producer, though. It's like, Jesus, man, you never laughed? But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I would say, seek it out on streaming. It's worth it. But if you don't like BJ Novak, probably don't watch this movie. As far as the Brian De Palma, I don't know, because Brian De Palma goes either wide with his comedy. It's never quite subtle that this movie would kind of need to go with the thriller element. It feels like with Brian De Palma, he can only go one way. I'm either going wide comedy or I'm going deep thriller. I can't do both. And I think I don't want to insult the man. He's probably very technically proficient. He'd be like, wait, what's email? What's this? What's Snapchat? What is all this? Like, it's what I would imagine if like William Friedkin had to make a Missing movie, where it's all on the computer screen. You'd be like, what the fuck is this?
Like, do that, yeah.
And he'd be like, how am I supposed to direct this? Am I in the same room? Do I tell them to emote to a computer? What the fuck? This isn't what I grew up doing. Fuck you. Watch French Connection. The new version with the new colors where you can barely see anything. I can see it, but I got prescription glasses. Okay, that is my quick William Friedkin impression. Next.
Poor Shaq.
Oh Lord! Hey, they all would have fit somehow in Vengeance, but you could just take and pick where you want to put them. Let's see, which one should we do? Okay, I know what we'll do next. Since we're talking many moods and movies that go all over the place, let's talk Bullet Train. The latest movie by David Leitch, who made not only was one of the co-directors of John Wick, but he made why can't I
Deadpool 2.
Yes, and he made
Hobbs and Shaw.
Yes. I'm just not good with fast movies. But either way, this is his next over-the-top action film where we have Brad Pitt playing, I guess, kind of an assassin of sorts who has just come back from anger management classes and is taking a simple snatch and grab job, and how it's convoluted by a bunch of assassins on a train with different directives, yet they keep crossing each other's paths. This film, was actually adapted from a novel. I was surprised to find out. But that also explains why everybody has such, when it's revealed, kind of a rich backstory. But watching this film, it felt like a comic book mixed with a cartoon, only live action, because it plays on so many genres and so many stereotypes and so many like Tarantino-esque dialogue scenes of assassins who have like strange nicknames or strange ways of doing things and double crosses, triple crosses, whereas Brad Pitt is just kind of the nice guy assassin who just keeps finding himself in all this trouble. It works on a movie level as long as you know that's this type of movie. If you're looking for anything deep, you're not going to find it here. It's way too long. This movie could have been shortened by 20 minutes and still had the same effect. I liked most of the actors involved. It does get a little more ridiculous towards the end with way too much CGI towards the end. And I feel like a lot of favors were paid back with this movie because a lot of the cameos are from each other's stars cameo in each other's films. So they all penultimate paying Brad Pitt back with this movie. Should I spoil the cameos or just leave it out?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Okay. For instance, he guest starred in The Lost City. So Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum are here in their own cameos. And, not blinking, you miss them. They actually have lines. And then the man who has never said no to a guest appearance or script in his life, Ryan Reynolds, is here for one scene, just like Brad Pitt was in Deadpool 2 for a blink and you miss it cameo. I will say Zazie Beetz' character was the only one who took me by surprise in this whole movie. Because I did not expect to see her in this movie. And Michael Shannon, I did not expect. But at least I can tell he's having fun. And that's the whole thing of this movie. The cast seems to be having fun, but can you say the same as an audience member? Because it gets so zany after a while, it doesn't make any sense, and you're just accepting things. Because, okay, why not? I give it a mild reservation. If you're into dumb action films, this is the movie for you. But if you're looking for something a little more plausible or at least well thought out, this is not the movie for you. Andre, what did you think of Bullet Train?
Bullet Train disappointed me. I was really looking forward to it, that I wanted to see it at the theater, didn't get a chance, so I had to wait till it was available on streaming. And I guess I thought it was going to be like an innovative action film, given David Letterman's credits. He's been Brad Pitt's stuntman for years, so I figured this was going to be like their big collaboration that they would be very successful with. And I didn't feel that. I agree, it was way too long. Some of the characters, they kind of drew out their storylines way too slowly. Certain cameos with the Zazie Beetz, I felt like she was kind of wasted in her part. And I knew what I was getting into, that this was going to be like a zany type of action film that kind of had like a Hong Kong style to it. But for some reason, maybe because of the length, I just got bored after 90 minutes. So they probably could have cut this down a lot quicker, a lot tighter, and maybe, I don't know, just at points where I think it got a little too dramatic. It shouldn't have to be that way, particularly with Aaron Taylor Johnson and Brian Tyree Henry's characters. I thought maybe that was, I get what they were trying to do, and I kind of like them, but it was maybe a little too drawn out. So no recommend on this one. I'm not crazy about it.
So you didn't like Guy Ritchie characters in this? With Tangerine.
Guy Ritchie has a certain approach that's very grounded. This wasn't.
Well, the whole thing is that this is like something that you feel like somebody on a sugar high would have dreamt up. Just kept writing through it because so bright. It's so it's loaded with colors, but eventually, after you have all that candy, you feel like throwing up, and that's what it's like watching the movie to a certain extent. I mean, I give it a mild recommendation. I think I liked it a little bit more than you, but I guess because I didn't have maybe as much expectations as you. Let me put it to you this way. This is like how a music film, you have a certain energy, but then you have a Baz Luhrmann music film, which is like dialed all the way fucking up. That is what, like this movie. You have your crazy action films, then you have this film, and it's dialed way the F up. So if you don't like Brad Pitt, this is not the movie for you. I'll still say it's better than Spy Game.
I'll give it credit where credit's due. Bad Bunny didn't ruin it for me.
No. He wasn't gonna ruin it for me either way, but I'm just like, but like I said, I still like this better than Spy Game, which I think is Brad Pitt's worst movie. So, and finally, our last movie is a movie Andre has praised in the past, Emily the Criminal with Aubrey Plaza, where she plays Emily the Criminal. Emily, who is $70,000 in debt and needs to make money as fast as she can, and answers pretty much a coworker's suggestion that how she could first start making $200 really fast, non-sexually, and then, she enjoys the rush, she enjoys the excitement, and of course she enjoys the money, and how she's kind of seduced not only by the crime, the money, but also even the guy into, getting bigger and bigger into this as, it kind of does help her life, but it also kind of ruins her life in equal measure. I really like this movie. I didn't love it maybe quite as much as you did, but I really like it. And realistically, the main reason is Aubrey Plaza, because we were introduced to Aubrey Plaza in general, all of us, as more of a comedic actress and comedian who always has this automatic deadpan. But what I really liked in her career is that she still does those roles, but she also measures them with a lot of dramatic roles that where if she was more of a comedic actress, you'd question, like, I don't know if she can do this, but because it's Aubrey Plaza and that demeanor, you're like, I can kind of see her in this role. And she actually excels at these roles a lot of times, even better than her comedic work a lot of the time. I'm thinking Black Bear. That was like a tour de force performance. And even on the television show Legion. And I'm willing to go as so far to call her, and you know how much I love Jenna Rollins, she might be one of the closest to this generation's Jenna Rollins, because at least with her, she can't exactly be typecast in any roles because there is no necessarily Aubrey Plaza role, because she's shown she can do whatever she wants to do and does it well. You would have thought Wednesday Addams would be like the dream perfect role for her, or Daria. And it shows she can play normal characters. She can play deadpan characters. She can play funny characters. And, I'm, all for whatever she wants to do. I hope she continues on this trajectory with these types of roles. And even Theo Rossi impressed in his role as, the criminal / kind of lover of hers in this film. It's a long way from Shades on Luke Cage. But also, I just in general love the film. It's not overly violent. It's not overly sexual. It doesn't feel exploitive. It even has Gina Gershon in a blink and you miss it role. I really enjoyed this film, even though it's like obviously a film that could have only been made in California. This would have been a totally different story in New York. So, and I even like the ending. Few questions about the ending, but I can live with it. So I would definitely recommend this film. And Andre, obviously, since we know you liked it, talk about Emily the Criminal.
I agree with all points you mentioned about Aubrey Plaza, and I'll also go as far as to say I think this movie for her is what Blue Collar was for Richard Pryor. It's the movie that really shows you that, yeah, she's not just the Parks and Rec chick. She can really act her ass off. And particularly not even the scenes where she's like stealing stuff or, like towards the end when they try to, rob her and the cops are kind of coming close. But even in the scenes where she's trying to get a legit job and she's going into the interviews and she's being grilled about her past and, you know, just the difficulties of trying to get a legit job. I think she did an amazing job to the point where you could really relate to her pain. Anybody that's been in a situation trying to, be interviewed and then you get questioned about stuff you don't want to talk about. She really delivers that. And definitely props to Theo Rossi, who I've met, very nice guy, and definitely one of those actors that I appreciate as someone who could play a dark role but then give it some humanity. He delivers that here, and you do believe this attraction between him and Aubrey Plaza that works, and you feel for him when things happen not so well for him at the end. Overall, this was a very kind of down and dirty crime thriller with not a lot of comedy in it. This is pretty straightforward. And I think it's something that I think is highly underrated. And it's one that I would certainly recommend for people. If you have Netflix, you should watch it.
Yes, I agree. This is, for the most part, most of the movies we talked about today, obviously would recommend. So I would say try and check all of them out. Nothing is horrible that we talked about today. So, might not be a winner for one of them, but it's at least decent. So, unfortunately, that ends our business for this episode. But as you know, there is always unfinished business to be done and had. But before we go, have you seen Call Me By Your Name? If not, why not? Because it's fucking awesome. And Andre, what film would you recommend?
Have you seen The Menu? If not, why not? Because it is fucking awesome.
Yes, it is. And with that, we end this episode.